Long before Marvel told the story of the Black Widow, women had already walked that path in real life, forced into hard choices by pain, loss, and the hunger for justice. This is the story of Namsa, a woman who lost her husband and her 2 children, and who was changed forever by that loss. Namsa came from the kingdom of uKhahlamba, a land known for its great warriors and victories. uKhahlamba lay between rival territories, and war was not just an event there, it was a season. Neighboring kingdoms usually rose against one another, not for glory alone but for expansion. Any land that lost was taken, its people were forced to bow, its fields and warriors claimed by the winner.
At the time, the kingdom was ruled by King Zwide, a man known more for his careless habits than for his wisdom. He drank heavily, chased women, and treated rule as an afterthought. Though he was strong in body and a good warrior, Zwide governed without caution, carrying the crown with little regard for the lives tied to his decisions. During the season of war, the elders of uKhahlamba warned the king to wait. Their people served the sun god, a force believed to watch over battle, harvest, and every decision made by the people. Before the people went to war, the king was required to stand at the old shrine at the early hours of the morning, drink the bitter libation made from burned roots and salt, and offer his breath and blood in silence. It was not a show, it was a burden carried by the king to protect the people. The drink burned the throat and left the body weak for days, but kings before him had done it and lived. King Zwide refused. He mocked the elders, calling the ritual a fear meant for weaker men. He claimed that the warriors of uKhahlamba were naturally strong and capable of winning wars from the times of his ancestors, that the ritual was just an act put up by cowards. Against every warning, he sent his warriors out before sunrise, banners raised, drums loud, without the blessing of the sun god. The battle did not go as planned. The enemy moved during the night, quiet and unseen. When the warriors of uKhahlamba arrived, the land worked against them. Thick clouds hid the sun and made it hard to see. The enemy struck from the sides and from behind. Their captain shouted orders, but the words were lost in fear and noise. By midday, the fight fell apart. Warriors were trapped and killed where they stood. Some tried to run, but the enemy followed them through grass and stones. Others were hurt and captured, tied and dragged away. When the fighting ended, the ground was covered with bodies and broken weapons. The invaders did not stop with the soldiers. They moved toward the village, burning huts and taking children hostage. Some were killed while others were used to draw their families out of hiding. The kingdom was filled with blood and bodies. Namsa's husband was among the warriors who never came home. Her 2 children were killed that same night. When the king finally came to his senses, fear caught him. He went to the shrine and drank the bitter libation as his ancestors once did. The taste burned his mouth, and his knees shook greatly. He knelt and offered prayers desperately and out of great fear. Nothing happened at first, but then the sun god answered not with mercy, but with his duty to protect the people as he was bound by an old covenant with the ancestors of uKhahlamba. The sun broke through the clouds that night, bright and harsh. The air got hot and great heat fell without warning. The invaders became confused. The sun did not set, it hung low and red in the sky, burning through the night so bright and harsh. The enemy warriors could not tell night from day. They shouted orders, but voices came from everywhere at once. Their camps broke apart as men stumbled into each other, blinded by the harsh light. They clashed by mistake, killing each other in the process. Cries of warning turned into screams of pain. Some ran toward the river, thinking it was the road home, only to fall into the water and be swept away. Others marched in circles, driven by heat and panic, until thirst dropped them to their knees. Their captains tried to restore order, but the sun's glare burned their eyes and twisted their thoughts. By morning, the enemy had torn itself apart. The land of uKhahlamba was quiet again, but the dead were many, and none could be called back. In the ashes of King Zwide's mistake was a woman who had lost everything, who this sudden loss changed forever.
Years passed, and life in uKhahlamba slowly returned to its old rhythm. broken homes were rebuilt with fresh mud and wood, and fields were planted again. Drums were beaten during festivals, and songs rose into the air as if the land had never known grief. People spoke of the war as something finished, a dark season that had ended. They laughed again, they danced again. To many, it felt like life had gone back to normal. But it was not so for Namsa. Her days were heavy and slow. Each morning reminded her of what was missing. Her husband's place beside her was empty. Her children's laughter was gone. The pain never softened. It grew worse every day. In her heart, the blame settled firmly on the king. It was his careless choice that sent men to die. It was his pride that delayed the prayers, yet he still ruled. The people bowed to him and praised him, as if nothing had happened. Namsa could not understand how they forgave so easily. The world around her moved forward, but she remained trapped in that single night when everything was taken from her. One day, without warning, King Zwide announced a great festival. He ordered food, music, women, and strong drinks to fill the palace and the streets. He said the people needed joy and release. When Namsa heard the news, something burned inside her. How could he celebrate when so many graves were still fresh? How could he call for pleasure when her children had died in pain? Her grief turned into a sharp, steady anger, and for the first time, she began to think of revenge. Namsa left her home and joined the women chosen to serve in the palace. She dressed like the others and walked with them, keeping her head low. She had no clear plan and she carried no weapon, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She wanted King Zwide dead, and she was willing to wait for the chance. Days passed inside the palace. Namsa worked from morning until night. She cooked, cleaned, carried water, and poured drinks for guards and guests. The palace was loud with laughter and song. Men drank until they stumbled. Women whispered stories in the corners. Namsa listened carefully. She learned the routines of the palace. She learned when the guards grew careless and when the king drank the most. Still, she did not see him. Each night, as she lay among the other women, her anger grew heavier. Doubt sometimes crept in. She wondered if she had made a mistake, if she would ever reach him at all. But every time her strength weakened, she remembered her children and her dead husband, and so she stayed, watched, and she waited, knowing that patience was now her sharpest weapon. After the war, King Zwide did not find peace. The sun god answered his late prayer, but not with mercy alone. The god kept his old promise to the ancestors and protected the land, but the king himself was marked for his pride and was punished. The sun god cursed him with the spirit of the Tokalash, a demon that came at night to steal souls and cause restlessness to people. When darkness fell, Zwide felt watched. Each night, just as his eyes closed, a heavy weight pressed on his chest and his breath would lock in his throat. His body would freeze, unable to move or cry out. In the corners of the room, something small and twisted moved. The Tokalash came in silence. It was short and bent, with dry skin like old bark and eyes that reflected firelight. It would climb onto the king's body and laughed softly as he struggled. Every night the guards would hear choking sounds and rush in, but the creature would vanish before their eyes. This happened for so many nights, and Zwide grew thin. Drinking became the only thing that calmed his fear. One night, during a long drinking spree, the king suddenly collapsed at the table. His throat closed, and his face darkened as he clawed at his chest. Servants panicked, unsure of what to do. Namsa was there, pouring drinks at the edge of the room. She stepped forward, lifted his head, and struck his back hard, again and again, until the blockage cleared. The king gasped and pulled in air like a drowning man pulled from water. When he got himself, his eyes landed on her. She offered a low bow, took a step back, and returned to her place. Later that night, Zwide sent for her. He ordered a meal prepared and told his servants to bring the woman who saved him. When Namsa arrived, he thanked her and invited her to sit and eat with him. She refused calmly and respectfully. She said she was only there to serve the king and nothing more. King Zwide laughed at first, thinking it was a game. But when she did not change her mind, His interest in Namsa grew stronger because no woman had ever refused him before. From that night on, Zwide insisted that Namsa serve his meals alone. He said the food tasted wrong without her presence. When she stood near him, the tight feeling in his chest eased and his hands stopped shaking. The nights she slept in his chambers, the tokalash did not come. No weight pressed his chest and he was not choked. He slept deep and dreamlessly. Days turned into weeks and King Zwide grew attached to her without fully understanding why. He would not eat unless she served him. He often asked her to sit nearby while he drank. Soon he began to speak to her, not as a servant, but as a man burdened by rule. He asked her what she thought about disputes, about land, about war. Namsa answered carefully without fear. Her words were steady and honest, and the king listened to her words. Soon, she was no longer treated as a servant, but she was not named a concubine either. She moved freely in the palace. Guards stepped aside for her. Elders noticed that the king was calmer, cleaner when she was near. Namsa became his companion, his comfort, his quiet strength. To the king, she was peace. To Namsa, she was closer than she had ever been to the man who destroyed her life. And she waited, patiently and silent, for the right moment to decide how her revenge would come. From her quiet talks with the king, Namsa began to see that Zwide was not cruel by nature, but he was weak in judgment and alcohol clouded his thoughts. Each time he was faced with a hard decision, he chose the easiest path, not the wisest one. Namsa understood then that a man like this could not lead uKhahlamba for long without destroying it. The kingdom had survived war, but it would not survive another season of careless rule. When matters of the land were brought before him, Zwide no longer listened first to his elders. He waved them aside and said, "Ask Namsa what she thinks." The elders obeyed, though their faces were tight with shame and anger. The king leaned on her for every choice, yet he still feared standing on his own. He stopped calling for his wives to his chambers, and the women who once filled his halls were dismissed. He only kept Namsa at his side. This made her a target. Whispers followed her through the palace. Some called her a witch, while others said she had trapped the king with charms. Hatred grew around her like weeds, but no one knew who Namsa was, and she did not step back. She just waited patiently. One evening, the king called for Namsa to speak of 2 new laws he wished to pass. The first law demanded heavy labor from the people. Every household was to bring in at least 30% of their farm produce every season, and each household was also obliged to provide one adult to work the king's fields, roads, and storehouses until the dry season was over. The second law spoke of war. He said the kingdom must prepare for future battles by taking children from conquered lands and raising them as laborers and fighters for uKhahlamba. He spoke of both laws as strength and order. Namsa felt fear grip her chest. She knew her people would suffer from hunger if he took up to 30% of their farm produce, and that other children would suffer and die like her own children if he carried the second law out. She spoke quickly, warning him that such commands would crush the people and turn the land against him. The king's face darkened. His calm broke. "I did not ask for your approval," he said sharply. "I asked how it should be done." Namsa fell silent. She realized then that his dependence on her opinion did not mean that he was wiser now. It only meant he was still dangerous. That night, as he planned the laws and sent messengers to prepare them, Namsa made her choice. The kingdom could not be saved by her simply guiding Zwide. His reign had to end. Under the cover of night, she left the palace and went to the far end of the city, to the house of the king's stepbrother. The man had been pushed aside long ago, given no seat in council and no voice in the kingdom. He lived quietly, farming his own land, watching the kingdom from a distance. Namsa told him of the 2 laws, of the growing anger among the people, and of the danger facing uKhahlamba. He did not speak of wanting the throne, he spoke only of the land, the children, and the future. He said the people were already tired, already afraid, and that these laws would break them. When Namsa finished, he said he would not move out of ambition, but out of duty. If the kingdom was to be saved, the crown would have to change hands. Namsa knew the king's stepbrother was an ambitious man and that he was raising a secret army waiting patiently for the day he would take the throne. Her plans were not to make him king, but to use him in putting Zwide away from the throne. The next day, Namsa covered her face with a dark veil and went down to the market. She walked slowly, stopping where women gathered to grind grain and where men argued over prices. She whispered of the new laws the king planned to pass and of the hard labor they would bring. She reminded them of past wars and the people who lost their loved ones because of the king's foolishness. She said the king had acted without wisdom before, and now he was doing it again. Then she planted sharper words. She said the king no longer ruled on his own, that he depended on a woman to think for him, to calm him, to guide his hand. She asked quietly how a man like that could lead a great kingdom like uKhahlamba. Some laughed in disbelief while others spat in anger. Namsa then spoke of the king's stepbrother. She said he was steady, disciplined, and respected by the ancestors. She said the kingdom would be safer in his hands. At last, she whispered that if the people wished to be heard, they should gather at the palace on the next full moon, when the king would be drinking and open to listen to them. Before anyone could ask who she was, she slipped away into the crowd. By evening, the words had grown legs. The gossip spread from house to house, from fireside to fireside. Anger mixed with old grief. By morning, the king was no longer just careless in the people's minds. He was weak, unworthy, and ruled by a woman. And the people cursed Namsa, saying she was part of the king's problems. She went again to the king's stepbrother and told him the city was turning. She said the king would drink heavily on the night of the full moon, that she would weaken him further, dull his senses, and leave a way open for him to enter the palace without resistance. She spoke calmly, as if discussing weather, not blood. The stepbrother listened and said little. He understood that once that night came, there would be no turning back. When the full moon drew near, Namsa leaned close to the king and spoke softly into his ear. She told him she had heard whispers of his stepbrother plotting against him, that the man might try to strike while the king was out celebrating. She urged him to drink inside the palace instead, where she could watch over him. Fear settled easily in Zwide's heart. He trusted her more than any guard or elder. With her plans moving on their own, Namsa finally allowed herself to rest. For the first time in many years, she felt the weight in her chest loosen. The path ahead was dark, but it was no longer uncertain. On the night of the full moon, King Zwide did not leave the palace. He sat awake in his chamber, refusing to drink and his hand never far from his blade. The moonlight spilled through the doorway and painted the floor white. Every sound made him tense. Every shadow felt like a threat. Namsa's warning had taken root in his heart, and fear kept him sharp. Just before midnight, his stepbrother slipped into the palace through a hidden passage that Namsa opened up for him. He moved quietly, certain that he would find the king lost in alcohol, slow and careless. He stepped into the chamber, ready to strike. Zwide rose from the darkness like a waiting beast. His blade flashed and cut deep into his brother's back. His stepbrother cried out, stumbling back in shock and pain. He turned and ran for the hidden passage, but when he reached it, a stone blocked his way. Someone had sealed it. Panic took him as he ran through the halls, bleeding, calling for help that did not come. Zwide chased him without mercy, drove him toward the palace entrance, and there, under the open sky and the full moon, stabbed him again, this time killing him. At that moment, the people arrived. They had come in anger, stirred by rumor and grief, ready to demand change. What they saw instead froze them in place. There was their king standing over the fallen man they had placed their hopes in, his hands red with blood, his face twisted with fear and rage. Cries rose at once. No one listened when Zwide tried to speak. His words drowned under shouts. The crowd rushed him. Some people stoned him while others used sticks. He fell beneath them, crushed by the very people he ruled. As his strength faded, his eyes found Namsa standing at the edge of the crowd. She did not move to help him, neither did she speak. In her eyes, he saw the truth at last. Understanding broke him more deeply than any wound. King Zwide died knowing he had been led to his end by the woman he trusted the most. When the anger cooled, the people turned on Namsa. Some called her a witch and others named her a traitor who misled the king. Before they could lay hands on her, she stepped away from them, walked to the edge of the cliff close to the place and threw herself down. Her body broke where it fell, but no one picked up her bones. She was left for the dogs to lick. No graves were marked for her, and so the reign of Zwide ended with no honor placed on his name. Namsa's pain had shaped the fate of a kingdom, yet it did not heal her own pains. uKhahlamba would remember that night as stories passed in whispers. Long after Namsa's name faded from memory, her story did not end. They said she was a woman who wanted more than she deserved, but a few understood the truth that her decisions were shaped by loss. And as years passed by, stories like the Black Widow were created because the world had already known women like Namsa. Women who learned to survive grief, to move in silence, and to turn pain into purpose. And when power grows careless, when justice is denied, the widow always returns.